This is Capitalize Your Finances, the show representing you, a select group of excited, ready, and fired up listeners seeking to potentially maximize your money moves and get after it. We don't settle for generic advice of always and nevers. Our currency is our intellect, and we constantly seek the logical way of likely creating advantages to potentially maximize wealth for our personal and unique situations. The show brings you the step-by-step framework to capitalize your finances in the aspects of your financial situation, and we strive to explore strategies and ideas to potentially help you capitalize on your financial decisions. We are capitalizers, and this is our show.
Welcome back to Capitalize Your Finances. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Panayiotou, the Cap and Capitalize. And today we are breaking in the Capitalize Your Finances podcast studio with none other than one of our family friends and a legendary car podcast host, Mark Greene of Cars Yeah. Welcome to the show.
Well, this is fancy digs. I remember not too long ago you said, hey, I want to do a podcast. Okay, that's nice. And now you've like gone over the top. This is very, very cool. Congratulations.
Thank you. Well, and I promised that we were going to break in the podcast studio with you. So it is an honor to have you in. And before we dive into the world of Cars Yeah, I want you to first take our listeners into kind of the what stemmed your love for cars. I mean, what got you into the world of automobiles?
Has to go back to my father. When I was about 5 years old, he bought a MGTC, a 49 MGTC. And the thing about that car, if you know that car, it's very slow, it's very tiny, but the doors are cut real low. So I could sit in that car as a 5-year-old and put my elbow on the car, which you couldn't do with cars back in there. This was 64, 65, just dated myself. And I just remember riding in that car. It was right-hand drive. So my dad had a spare steering wheel, so I got to carry a steering wheel in my lap. We'd pull up to a stoplight, and people would look down, and I'd be this 5-year-old kid with a steering wheel, and they'd go, what on? There's two steering? And plus, not many people had seen those cars back then. So, yeah, that's what started it. That car for me, I could still smell that leather and the gasoline and all that. And then when my mom and dad would be in the car, my sister and I would ride on the back shelf. No seats. Total child, abandonment issues.
Sure.
And we would hold on. There was a bar across the seats. He called it the chicken bar. He said, if you're chicken, you'll hold on to the bar as I go around the corners. So that's really what started it all for me with cars, yeah.
And so do you remember the moment or the car that made you go, okay, I don't know where this is going to take me, but I want this to be a part of my professional life?
Oh, gosh. Oh, man. I think it was Porsches for me. My listeners know I'm a Porsche fanatic.
Oh, yeah.
So
as do we.
Yeah, I know. There was a guy that lived up at the end of the street we lived in a typical neighborhood where there's families, but there was this one guy who was a bachelor, and he drove a late 50s Porsche Speedster, which I've always wanted one, but his was a Carrera with the 4-cam motor. Today, those things are the holy grail, $1 million cars. And he would go up the street, and I'd always hear him, and I'd run to the window, and we'd go up as kids, and he'd let us sit in the cars. And when I started surfing a little later, he would take me surfing, and we would stick the surfboards, which was hilarious because that car is like a little bathtub and go to the beach. But that was probably the thing that started it on that particular mark. And then I had some friends, dads, who had Porsches and so forth. So that started it for me. I joined the Porsche Club when I was in high school. And gosh, so now I've been a member, 50 years.
How many people were in the Porsche Club in high school?
I don't think anybody was. I was kind of a fanatic. I was the only kid in my high school that covered my car every day.
Okay.
I had a Carmen Ghia that I bought that I restored, and I always covered it. And one day, my friends, my sister, they convinced my sister to bring an extra key. They uncovered my car, took my car away to a friend's garage, and put my cover on another car. So when I walked out and uncovered it, it was not a Carmen Ghia underneath. So very bizarre.
Yeah. Well, I want to actually switch gears into specifically talking about Cars Yeah. You obviously had a career before that. That's for another time. I wanted to focus on what got your show to where it is today, but then what also sparked the inspiration. And in my experience with interviewing guests, and we've had a number of guests on our show, most podcast hosts use their podcast as an as an upsell, if you will, for another product or course, you name it. But for you, this is it. And so I wanted to first start by asking, what even made you come up with the idea of starting Cars Yeah?
Well, a person my son, Blake, was the guy. And I had worked for 20 plus years in what started as a direct mail catalog business in the automotive sector, then evolved into online. We manufactured our own car care products and things like that. And I left after 20 plus years. It was time to go do something different. Plus, we had some pretty serious things going on in our family. My wife was ill. She had a serious tumor removed from her leg. She was bedridden, basically couldn't walk for months. My son was away at college, and so there was that expense to kind of think about, right? And then my dad had fallen and broken his neck at the age of 80, so I was going back and forth to San Diego to try to help him. And Jill, my wife's mother, had breast cancer. Yeah. And so it was like, oh my gosh, the trifecta of, misery here. Yeah. And so I was trying to figure out something to do, and my son had come home from college for a break, and we were walking, and typically the son says, "Father, what should I do for a living?" Yeah. And in this case, the father said, "Son, what should I do for a living? Because your tuition is really expensive." And so he said, "Dad, you've been taking me to car events my whole life. I raced vintage cars for 12 years. He always came to the track with me and helped out." He said, "Why don't you start a podcast?" Now, this was just 10 years ago. And I said, "What's a podcast?"
Right.
And I never heard of a podcast. I might have maybe, but there weren't people doing podcasts really back then. I think the first car podcaster was Adam Carolla, who really kind of launched the whole idea of a car podcast for many people. But most people couldn't figure out how to even listen to it. They thought it was radio. So longer story short, I decided, okay, because I used to joke at my old job since I was the president of the company, my next job is going to have no employees. Yeah. And no commuting, because all of my life I've commuted, these miserable waste of time commutes, long before we had podcasts to listen to or books on tapes or whatever it was. So I spent about 3 months calling every podcaster I could think of. Some of them would never call me back. Most wouldn't, sadly. And that's why to this day when people ask me for advice, I give them time because, you wish somebody had helped you. But a few people did. And so I came up with this concept. My wife came up with the name Cars Yeah after watching I think it was a Hotels.com, Hotels Yeah commercial. Tried to find a domain even 9.5, 10 years ago that has the word cars in it that's not already taken. But I grabbed it. And I was a graphic designer. I was in marketing, so I designed the logo. Came up with the whole business plan, probably way overdid it. I wrote an entire business plan. And I decided to launch the show on May 28th, which is 1 year after I'd left the last company I was with. And so Cars Yeah was born. And I thought I'd try it for 6 months or 12 months, see if I could generate enough people listening so that somebody would advertise with me, because I come from a world of marketing and advertising. And at month 3, this guy calls me out of the blue, NOCO battery chargers. I'll give them a plug here, even though they don't advertise with me anymore. And he said, "Hey, your show's kind of cool. Cars, yeah, you do 5 shows a week. Oh my gosh, but you have no advertising." I said, "Well, I could." So, would you like to advertise? Yeah. How much? I have no idea. How about $1,000 a month? Okay, sends me a check. Yeah. And I stood in the driveway, almost teared up, going, okay, validation. Yeah. I think something could happen with this here. And that was really the beginnings of it. So I attribute it to Blake, my son. He's the one that gave me the concept and the encouragement. Dad, you got to do this, and help me with the technical side, because while I was running a company, I was not an IT guy. I was a designer, but never designed a website. I had to figure out how to do that. Coding, those people live in a different sandbox. And my hat's off to coders, because it's a weird, wacky world.
It's a different world.
Yeah, but that's how it all started, and there you go. And now today's show, as we're recording this, is show, let's see, I just recorded show number 2,400.
Good Lord.
I know, crazy.
That is wild, because I think we're on show 75.
Yeah, well, put the gas down. Catch up, dude.
Yeah, well, we've got a day job on the other end of it.
This is true. This is true.
And it's funny. So for listeners, there's actually a little joke that Mark and I have had for years. So his son Blake is best friends with my brother and also social media manager Ty, who is the one actually controlling all of this behind the scenes. So if you're not following Ty, you need to go do it. Yep. Vital Media Studios. But for years, there was this kind of inside joke because we had never met, and I was just convinced you're not real.
That's what I heard. You thought I was a fake dad. There was no real,
and I think
Weird.
Ty and Blake became best friends in like 6th or 7th grade, and we had just met a couple years ago. So we went like 15 years.
It was weird.
Yeah, it was. And then when we finally met and we've become really good friends, it's been fantastic.
It's awesome.
Well, and I wanted to go backwards a little bit on the business plan. So once you had the idea for Cars Yeah, what did your business plan originally look like?
Well, the idea was to do as many shows as fast as possible because I wanted to attract advertisers. So the goal was put as many shows out as possible. Most podcasters do one a week, which I understand. And if it's a side hustle, even more so because there's a lot of work behind this. But I decided to do something crazy. And everybody I spoke to in the podcasting world said, you're nuts. That's too many. You'll never find enough people. There's too much work involved, and I did this all grassroots, and I'm a cheapskate when it comes to spending money. So, unless it's on cars. So I decided I'm going to try to figure all this out myself. So I watched all these YouTube videos. How do you record? What software? What kind of mic to have? All this kind of stuff. And since I was at home caring for Jill, I couldn't go anywhere. And my neighbors would laugh because saying, do you ever sleep anymore? Because their light's on all night long. And I worked long days to figure out how to do all this stuff. So the 5-day a week was a definite plan because when you look at an advertiser and you say, you get 4 ads a month, and they go, yawn.
Right.
And a lot of people think of podcasting like radio, which it is, but it isn't because it's so niche if you're doing it right, like what you're doing.
Yeah.
And what I do, it's very focused on an audience. So I decided to create my avatar, which was who my main listener was. His name's Bill. And older, because I figured an older avatar is someone with money versus young kids these days, which look at the next shiny object every time it flies in front of their eyes, don't focus maybe as much. Sorry if you're young. But all the studies I read that showed that. So that was a definite niche. And so I thought, okay, how can I do this? And then I decided I need to understand my Simon Sinek why. If you follow Simon Sinek, great guy.
Yeah.
And why am I doing this? And that's how I developed my mantra and how I developed my 15-second elevator ride description of what it is I'm doing. My mantra is 3 words, inspiring automotive enthusiast. I'm interviewing inspiring automotive enthusiasts so that we can together inspire other people to realize that you can have a career in a field you love. So many of us know people that have great careers. I have friends who make great money. But that's not their passion. They live for the weekends or they live for retirement. Well, you might not get to the weekend. You might not get to retirement.
Yeah.
So for me, it's all about cars. I worked in the car industry for 30 years now, longer than that. So I won't say every day's not like going to work because it is work. However, when you're focused on your passion versus selling toilets to industrial complexes, it's a little bit more interesting. So defining the why was a key part of that. And then also figuring out the format of how I was going to interview people. And I wanted the show to not be about me, but be about my guests and how they achieved that success they achieved. But we also talk about failures, how they overcame that. And then we get into some fun things about their cars and things they like about cars. So, yeah.
Yeah. Well, and for you, I've never met someone that writes a business plan and then it just stays the same. So I'm not even going to assume. I know it changed for you. My question is, did it change immediately or was it gradual? Was it calculated or were you just flying by the seat of your pants?
All of the above.
Okay.
Yeah, all of the above. When you start doing something you've never done that's so outside of your wheelhouse, because I always worked in the background. Even the company I worked with, the founder, it was named after him, but I was the guy driving the ship and doing a lot of the marketing stuff. So I was behind the scenes. So it'd be like Mrs. Fields, but the person who's actually making the cookies and making the setup for how the business runs, the operations. And for us, it was manufacturing, distribution, customer service, all of those things combined. So you're wearing a lot of hats. That's why I don't have any hair left. I wore it all off with all the hats I used on.
What's left, though, is nice hair.
Well, thank you.
You're
yes,
welcome.
it's back here somewhere. It's growing everywhere else except on my head. That's a cruel nature fit. Thank you very much. So, at any rate, it just started to evolve a bit. And then as you interview people, you start to realize, like real quickly, I changed what I called an interview to a conversation. Because you may find, at least with as many people as I was chasing in the old days, thankfully now I don't have to chase anybody, they come to me.
That's nice.
Was I would say, okay, I'm going to interview you. And they immediately freeze up because they think of a job interview or a client interview or a date interview. Or and they, I don't like interviews. That's a bad word. Okay, well, what do car people like? They like talking about cars. It's a conversation.
Yeah.
So let's turn it into a conversation. And then by giving them a format, I call it my conversation flow, then they see what's coming. And for 99% of my guests, they appreciate knowing the questions that are coming because people don't like to be caught short. And I do record and go back and edit, but a lot of people forget that or they don't read that in the pre-sheet I send them.
Yeah.
The guys, we don't read instructions, right?
Yeah.
We don't have to.
Yeah.
So, anyway, it evolved over time. But interestingly enough, the conversation flow has stayed very similar over time. I've changed some questions. And sometimes when you have a guest on the show, you never know where it's going to go. I've had some incredibly mind-blowing experience with people that I'm like, we're going to talk about what? And then you let them go like a fish, like let the line run.
Yeah.
Because this could get interesting.
That's interesting. So when I first started the show, I would send out the questions, and it's been hit or miss. Some people, they love having the questions. I remember I went on Retireaholics. That was like my first guest appearance I had. And I remember I asked the guys, and I don't know if you've heard of Retireaholics. They've taken the most mundane, objectively boring topic, which is like third-party administrative work and retirement plan, and in the retirement plan space, and then they sprinkle in alcohol, and it just gets absolutely wild.
Like the guy that does the vlogs with eating spicy chicken.
Yeah. It's like Hot Ones, but with retirement planning and alcohol. And I remember...
Really good mix there.
Yeah, I asked them, I'm like, so do you guys, send questions? And they're like, dude, we would never do that. Like, they were so opposed. I'm like, whoa, okay. And now it's at a point where, like you said, the best interviews I've had, like this one right now, are conversations, and you don't really know where it's going to go, but it's a controlled conversation. It's guided.
Sure.
That's the one thing I've never understood is how you got some of these people that do super long form, whether it's Rogan or Huberman or all these guys that'll go for 4 hours.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you've looked, they don't have really a script. They just kind of sit down and...
Well, you have to realize Rogan is interviewing mostly celebrities who are used to talking about themselves. That's what they love to do. It's like interviewing politicians.
Yeah. You
interview a politician, let him go. He'll talk for 10 hours about himself.
Yeah. Yeah.
Most people, however, that I have on my show are not of that stature. I've had celebrities, and I will say sometimes they're a bigger pain in the rear than regular folks.
Sure.
But I have a lot of comments from my listeners that like listening to regular folks.
Yeah.
Because they identify with that. Oh, that could be me. Yep. I mean, this guy races on the weekends? You can do that?
Yeah.
What?
Oh, yeah.
Don't tell my wife.
Yeah. Yeah.
But,
well, in my brother and I have had that conversation when we've had guests on and try to coordinate guests. In a lot of ways, we've recognized that celebrities actually, and we've been, knock on wood, pretty great with the celebrities we've had on, and they're everyday people. But to your point, when you have people that come on and it's just two everyday average Joes, the feedback, it may not be as prevalent because let's face it, who's going to listen to an average Joe versus, pick your celebrity?
Sure.
But the feedback you get from the average Joes and the fans that listen to the average Joes, it's so much more constructive, and it helps for me and my brother to niche down to the most quality content imaginable.
Right.
I wanted to talk to you about what the first year of your show looked like. You mentioned, after 6 months you got your first check, but what were specifically the strategies? Like, let's dive in a little bit more to the strategies you used that took you from zero to setting the stage for successful growth.
Well, I'm glad you said what it looked like because I don't want to think about what it sounded like. Yeah. I go back and listen to those early shows and I cringe. Like, oh my gosh. But you evolve. It's like, I call it seat time. All these car-related conversations, analogies. Seat time in racing is more time on the track, the better you are. it's like anything. I just interviewed a guy who's a pilot on the side. There's a book called The Killing Zone he mentioned that basically says the first, I forget the time period, but the first certain number of hours of flying an airplane is when everybody dies as a pilot because they get cocky and then they do stupid things and they crash. So
good to know.
So same with podcasting. Your first year you could crash and die, and that's the end of it. So for me, the flow was a key part, but finding people. When you do 5 shows a week, you're constantly hunting for people. And the challenge back then was you'd say, would you like to be on, even people I knew, would you like to be on my podcast? What's a podcast? Well, it's like radio, but it's not. You have a radio show? No, it's a podcast. Like, who listens to it?
Yeah.
And so you have to track who are, and sometimes you get people say, well, you don't have enough listeners. Come back in 3 years when you've got, Joe Rogan scale listeners.
Yeah.
Okay, well, that's not
Well,
gonna
and
happen.
even then, I don't mean to interrupt you, but all of the top podcasters still, I think Rogan had a studio, but a lot of these guys were still doing it out of like their closet.
Well, yeah, that's a great thing about podcasting. And I've helped several people become podcasters. One is a guy who does a podcast called Golf Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, he came to me and said, I want to be a podcaster, but I want to do it around golf. I want to do exactly what you're doing, but for golfers. Interview famous golfers, not so famous golfers. I said, that's a great idea. It wasn't his main job, but that was his passion. And so I helped him. We got about halfway into the learning lessons of it. And I remember one day he goes, this is too much work.
Yeah.
Because there's all these other components behind. Then people think you just get a mic and talk to somebody or talking. It's not that. I mean, look what you've done here. Oh my gosh.
I was going to say,
Yeah.
I can feel Ty on the other side of the camera, and we're going, no, you don't just set up the mic and go.
Well, you're over the top. This is way beyond what most people do. This is pro level stuff. My hat's off to you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Because again, it wasn't that long ago. You said, "Hey, Mark, can I talk to you about what podcasting is like?"
I remember when we got coffee.
Exactly. So, for me, it was this evolution, and chasing people was difficult. Coordinating to book people, scheduling to book people, then preparing for the show. So I have requirements people have to send me because most of my guests I've never spoken to, and in fact, I don't even really like talking to them before.
Yeah.
Because I don't want any preconceived. I like the excitement of it. I call this Forrest Gump's box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get, but it's always pretty tasty.
Yeah.
But every once in a while, you get a coconut one, and you go, bleh.
Yeah.
I don't like coconuts. So.
Yeah.
But for the most part, it's very, very encouraging. And when you're done, you kind of go, well, that was cool. And as long as the guests, when they're done, say, well, that was fun. And many guests at the end, well, we're done already?
Mm-hmm.
Well, we've been talking for 35, 40 minutes. Yeah, we're finished.
Yeah.
Well, I forgot to tell you about. But you learn as you go, and you have to evolve. Then I figured out, okay, I need to make relationships with PR firms, with publishers, with magazines, and you start to do deals. Like I did trade deals. Hey, if I could add a free ad in your magazine, I'll advertise on my weekly email campaigns, and I'll put a little ad there for you. So we did some sharing there. So then people, I saw you in Linkage magazine, or whatever it might be. So you learn all these little tricks because again, I was stingy. I didn't want to spend a lot of money, because I was just again paying for Blake's college. So,
Yeah, but I could actually argue against that in the fact that you did spend money. You were just very wise with the trading of currency.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I understand that. Yeah, there's a value there, but it forms relationships. So now you've got, say, a magazine publisher that does articles on people, and there was a day when I used to get a stack of 40 magazines a month. Well, magazines have gone away.
Yeah.
Many of them, not all of them.
Mm-hmm.
So now there's just these big magalog things, these coffee table books magazines, which are really beautiful. But you can go through there and find people in there and go, I'm going to find who owns that business and call them. Very few people say no to a podcast these days.
Yeah.
If you have some value, and for me, I also created a website. So when people go to my website and they click on the resources tab, they see all these people. Mm-hmm. I want to be one of those people.
Yeah.
It's like the Napoleon Dynamite selling the little Tupperware and they pull out the sailboat. I want one of those.
Yeah.
I want to be on that show because everybody's on that show.
Yeah. Well, and speaking of popularity, so when would you say your show really took off in popularity? And did the dollars follow alongside the popularity, or was that like a lagging record?
Well, dollars are always the tough part because trying to get people to advertise is difficult. And that's what everybody that I've spoken to in podcasting has a hard time with, and especially if they're not good at doing that. I'm not good at doing that. I even hired people along the way to try to do that for me. They weren't good at it either.
Yeah.
But I would say probably 2 years in, when I had, a substantial number of shows, people started noticing, oh, okay. And those first years or first months, you want to do things for people. So I even came up with the idea of, let's find some charities that I could do ads for free that tell people listening there's ad space. And, oh, by the way, how about doing an ad for myself? Did you know Cars Yeah is in the top 1% of, according to Libsyn, the RSS feed, Premiere, blah, blah, blah. So do your own ad to promote what you're doing, to tell listeners, you can advertise on my show, contact me.
Yeah.
I mean, kind of the duh moment for me was when I think I was 6 months in, and again, my wife, I married up in the brain category. She said, why don't you do an ad for yourself?
Yeah.
Oh, duh.
Yeah.
I'm a marketer. Yeah, failing marketer.
Well, we had the same thing when my book came out. My publisher's like, why aren't you advertising your book? Which is the sponsor for today's show, by the way.
Capitalizers, this episode is sponsored by the best-selling book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. Regardless of where you're at in your financial life, whether you're just beginning to express interest and commitment to your personal finances, at the pinnacle of your career, winding down into retirement, or thinking about your legacy for future generations, this book walks you through every step of the way so you can succeed on your terms and with your own values and passions guiding you. After reading this book, you will officially have Christopher A. Panayotu, the Cap in Capitalize, in your back pocket, guiding you in detail through every step of the way so that you can take charge of your finances, not the other way around. Head on over to Amazon.com today and start capitalizing your finances to the fullest with this incredible book, Capitalize Your Finances, the how-to financial framework that takes you from compoundingly clueless to monetarily magnificent. And now, back to the episode.
It's a great book,
And
by
I'm
the
like,
way.
thank you.
I hope we get to talk about it a little bit. 'Cause
Thank you.
I
Thank
wish
you.
it had been around when I was younger.
We will have plenty of time
Good.
to chat about it. But it was that same duh moment. And now it's interesting because Ty and I've been doing this now for about 2 years, and we're finally starting to turn that corner because the compounding it happens after about 3 years. And for you, I would imagine it happened a lot sooner because you were doing 5 shows a week, and unlike our real day jobs, that was it for you. I wanted to ask, as you were growing the show, which guests or guests really skyrocketed your popularity?
The celebrities. My first big celebrity was a guy named Stacey David, who had a TV show.
Okay.
And I never even had seen his show. Sorry, Stacey, but I just hadn't seen it.
Yeah.
I don't watch a lot of TV, so that's probably why.
That's okay.
So he was on the show, and I noticed that day, I'll never forget it, I was seeing 500 unique downloads a show or something at this time. I think it was 2 years in or something like that. And all of a sudden, 7,000. I went, so what happened yesterday?
Yeah.
Well, he was on the show. Well, he shared it. Now, getting guests to share their shows is like pulling teeth out of a chicken. They just won't do it. And I know. Yeah.
Oh, we are well aware of that.
It's a very odd thing because you say this is a free 30-minute advertisement. And we've had this talk about reminding them in the pre-show chat, reminding them afterwards, reminding them in emails. I promote all my shows every morning. Or Rich or I get on all my social media, and I say, today's show is here. Now, that has been a key thing for me because so many people I talk to say, I see you everywhere.
Yeah.
And I go, what do you mean everywhere? Well, maybe they're just on Twitter or Facebook. But to them, that's everywhere. And the key is my SEO is so strong that every day, happened today, I get an email, somebody who's trying to find one of my guests, Googles their name, first thing that comes up top line is this person on Cars Yeah. Then they send me a message. Hey, Stacey David, I'm so-and-so. I'm looking for a truck to build. Why'd you send me an email?
Yeah.
He was on my show like 7 years ago.
But
that has been a huge, when you talk about a turning point, my SEO is so strong. And even to this day, when I have a joke. There was a TV show called ER, right? Dr. Mark Greene.
Okay.
If you Google Mark Greene, the first 20 pages is that actor.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I remember the first day I was finally at like row 7 of the images. Oh, there's Mark Greene.
Yeah.
So he still shows up the top 5 row. I mean,
Yeah.
TV shows are powerful, but at any rate, yeah, you just have to put it out there, and you have to be with podcasting, like any business, consistency. And so many podcasters quit after month 5 or 6 because they think, how come I don't have 1 million listeners and I don't have anybody want to advertise with me?
Yeah.
Well, you haven't put out that many shows, and maybe you're not marketing to your avatar. You're not finding your audience yet. You got to be clear about that too. Who's your audience? It's easy for me as car people.
Well, and it's also interesting you mentioned like the Google. That's one thing we've had a huge advantage of. There are not many Christopher Poniotus out there. So you type in the name. If you can figure out the last name, you're like, oh, wow. We're
figuring out how to spell it.
Top feed in every category. Yeah. Well, I also was reading, so there are a couple of podcast facts I want to get into, because now that your show is averaging, I think what you said, 85 to 90,000 downloads a month.
Something like that. It kind of fluctuates. Summer always gets lower. I think it's because people are busy on all. For years I said, why are my numbers going down? It's August. People are on vacation.
Yeah.
Okay, duh. It's a little bit of a fluctuation.
Yeah, August is a very depressing month in the world of podcasting. So, but I get it.
Is that like September, October in the world of finance?
Yeah, that's right. And so, for you, I would say, because most podcasters are trying to conquer the mountain of getting downloads and listens. And it's safe to say that you have done that. And just to give listeners some context, I did some research before you came on.
Okay.
And the top podcasts in downloads over 30 days, which is what we live and die by. So this is what I found. So if you are in the top, if your podcast episode gets more than 124 downloads in 30 days.
124, not 124,000?
No, 124 downloads in 30 days.
That's it?
You're in the top 50%.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
50%.
If your episodes get more than 1,000 downloads, you're in the top 20%. If your episodes get more than 2,900 downloads a month, you're in the top 10.
And this is in 30-day period.
30-day periods.
Okay.
Okay. And then if your episodes get more than 6,700 downloads, you are in the top 3%. So given these facts, all businesses have challenges. So my question is this. Now that you've conquered the toughest challenge for virtually every podcast out there, what would you say are the greatest challenges you face with the business side of podcasting today?
Oh, finding advertisers. Yeah. Just because I'm lousy at it.
Yeah.
I'll be honest.
Yeah.
Finding advertisers. And then once you find them, somebody who's at least bit interested, being able to explain clearly where the value is. Mm-hmm. I get that part. What's valuable about it. That's the hard part, and I hear that from many. I'm part of some podcast groups, and they do forums, and I go online and listen to people. But those numbers you tell me always surprise me because, again, I'm always trying to put myself like I want to be Joe Rogan. Well, not him, but I want to be like him.
Right.
Right. But as how many times have I said my wife's more here today?
Yeah.
For you, honey.
Yes.
He's been in the celebrity business for 40 years.
Yeah.
I was behind the scenes until I started doing what I'm doing. Mm-hmm. So that celebrity status is built up. It's like actors who finally make it, and you think, oh, they've always been famous. No, they haven't.
No.
So for podcasting, those numbers are important to advertisers because they just want to know how many times are people hearing my ad. Right. And then identifying and helping them know how to advertise via your podcast. And for me, since I come from a marketing background, I've written tons of copy, I add a value. I say, I will write your ad and record it in my voice for free.
Yeah.
You would have to pay somebody to write it and to record it and provide it to me. I'll do it in my voice, which adds a incentive for my listeners because they now trust me. They listen to me every day. That I'm in their ears. I got on a plane once and just sat down next to a gentleman and his wife, and it was so funny because I started talking, and he goes, wait a minute, are you Mark Greene from Cars Yeah? And I show him, yeah, right here. I'm like, yeah. And his wife goes, oh, man, I'm sick of your voice. I said, why? She goes, because every morning he's in the shower. He plays your show, and it's blasting through the house. All I hear is you every morning talking about cars.
Yeah.
Sorry, ma'am. You know? So, but it's a combination of what we talked about.
Sure.
But finding advertisers, you have to get good at it or find somebody who's good at it that can go do that for you. Because for me, it's been a business. It hasn't gotten me super wealthy, but it's paid all the bills. More importantly, it's been fun and enjoyable. And I have met my Rolodex now, another airplane thing. A guy said, hey, have you had Chris so-and-so on your show? Well, I don't know. I pull up, I can't remember after 2,300, 4,400.
It wasn't Chris Ponio.
I haven't had him on the show. He doesn't drive a cool car yet. But someday.
Someday.
So
when I can afford it.
Yeah, there you go. So I pull up my Chris's and I go, well, let's see. And I'm scrolling through. And he goes, how many Chris's do you know? Well, probably 110.
Yeah.
What? My Rolodex, there's an old school word, but my contacts list is it's almost 6,000 now.
Yeah.
So all these people I know that's wild. If they've been on your show, they feel like they're your friend. At least I feel like they're my friend. And now you can reach out to them for help. Like last week, all my guests were famous race car drivers, Porsche race car drivers. Yeah. And people, oh my gosh, how did you get him on your show? So you build relationships like with business, and then the challenge is staying in touch.
Yes.
So I stay in touch with a weekly email. So all my guests get on my email list, and I send out an email every week. I was doing a blog for a while. I kind of got lazy and stopped doing it. I might pick it up again.
Okay.
I just wasn't interested in it anymore. So why am I doing it if I'm not interested in it? So, yeah, it's a combination, and that's what trips people up when they think podcasting's easy, is also the marketing. Because I have that background. You've got Ty. I don't have Ty. I have a guy in the mirror that's not as creative or handsome as Ty. So, I have to figure out how to do all that. But I have that background. So I do have a creative side. So I can do all sorts of cool, quick ads and things really fast. Like this morning, I have a relationship with a guy who runs a racetrack. And I noticed I keep track of everybody's birthdays. I send everybody a birthday email.
Oh, yeah.
Some days there's 20 of them. Well, this guy happens to have a birthday on the same day as Batman, Adam West, the classic Batman.
Yes.
I have a picture of me with Batman in the Batmobile because I spent 3 days with Adam before we lost him. And so I said, hey, Barry, guess what? You and Batman are both celebrating your birthday today. And I sent him, So it was a touch point, but people remember that kind of stuff. Yeah. And it's like thank you notes. Every one of my guests gets a handwritten thank you note.
Oh, yeah.
In the mail.
Oh, yeah.
With a sticker,
Yeah. Yes.
A little remembrance of me.
But not a hat.
Well, no, only you get the hat.
I got the hat today.
Yeah.
I decided not to wear it. I just got a haircut specifically for Mark, so I figured I'd let the hair flow.
Thanks for reminding me. That
Sorry, I know. I'm really rubbing salt on the wound.
Ouch.
Well, it's interesting on the podcasting side and business side, and I've had a number of conversations with friends and business partners in this regard, and that's some of those are the most exciting things is building the relationships. I get it depending on the type of business that you have, but podcasting, it's all of that and then almost squared. Like today, as of today's recording, which is, what is today, September 19th, 20th? I think today's the 19th.
Don't ask me. Yeah. They're all the same in
well,
my
today
world.
Today is one of our past guests, Ryan Dusick, the drummer for Maroon 5's birthday. So I called him today.
Perfect.
We had a nice little chat, and I said, hey, whatever you're doing, you deserve it, et cetera, et cetera. And he basically says, he's like, dude, no one ever calls me like that. And I was like, well, like anyone or just like
not your mom?
Podcast, He goes, no, like I got a text from my mom and my dad, And I go, well, dude, you deserve that. And you don't expect anything from it, but we've started to see that when my birthday, May 31st, 1991, comes around, we have people hit me up, whether it's LinkedIn or Instagram. Of course, I'll get a call from you and my brother and my mom and all of that. But that's the fun part of the podcasting world. And my wife, who listens to every episode, she's going to roll her eyes when she hears this. She's like, not every guest is your friend. I'm like, no, that's true. But the majority of them,
I think
they become
You
that.
Feel like they are.
Yeah.
I feel that way. And I know not everybody feels that way.
No.
And I always have a little, when people unsubscribe from your emails, and people do that. And when it's a guest that unsubscribes, it's like, oh, man.
Yeah.
Knife,
well, see, I never see that. That's outsourced to Ty on
well,
that
you're
one.
fortunate. But, I just had one this week. I'm like, really, Lisa? You don't love me anymore.
You should text her and ask her.
I used to do that. Hey, did I do something wrong to upset you? And typically, then they feel really guilty.
Oh, yeah.
No, I'm just sorry. I get so many emails and, or my assistant erased you. Okay, well, I'll resubscribe you.
Yeah. But at least they respond.
Typically, they do.
Yeah.
I don't do that anymore because I figure it might make them feel uncomfortable. If I get it, your email box is full, and
Yeah. Well, and I don't know, when I first started, it was kind of defeating because then you would kind of have that same question. But now it's at that point where, if you have someone subscribe or unsubscribe, you're kind of going like, all right, well, I got other fish to fry.
Well, it's the same with reviews on Apple Podcast.
Oh, yeah.
I remember reading the reviews. You never want to do that.
Yeah.
And I remember I got my first 1-star review.
Oh.
I'm still talking about it to this day.
Do you remember what it said?
Oh, yeah. He said, oh, this guy's terrible. It's like listening to Barbara Walters talk about cars. And I was like, what? And then I went, wait a minute. I mean, you may not like Barbara, but she was super famous.
Sure.
I could only dream to have that many people listening to me. So
Yeah.
I'm like, well, thanks.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
And you can't respond to the people. That's the hard part, Like,
Yeah.
But sometimes you can learn from your critics.
Mm-hmm.
And I have. Some people have said, I don't like the repetitiveness of your show. Try to loosen it up. And I've tried over the years to, if I see an opportunity with a guest to go down a path, I let them go down that path. It may be off script because you never know where it might take you. I had a guest who talked about a time she wanted to kill herself. We were talking about car shows that she put together.
Yeah.
Now, it linked back to that.
Yeah.
But I went, whoa, okay, go. You wanted to kill yourself?
Yeah.
And that story is dramatic. Now, since then, she has passed away. She didn't kill herself. But her parents, on her birthday, send me, say, Mark, this is the only recording we have of our daughter because she passed away in her 40s. And so,
oh my gosh.
Yeah, so we listened to her show with you on her birthday to remember her. And you go, wow, okay. So that makes you start to think about the impact you're making and the library you have of people's lives. Now we're going down a morbid path, speaking of that. I lost 10 guests last year who passed away. The year before, 8 previous guests had passed away. The year before that, 12 had passed away. So when you have as many guests as I've had, there's going to be some attrition, and many of my guests are older. And so you start to go, wow, so that kind of changes your viewpoint on your life and what you're doing and make sure you're having fun and all that kind of deep stuff starts to come arise. But I had people, had another one last week that said, your show with my dad, that's the only recording we have of my dad.
Yeah.
Now, he died when he was 89, so he had a full, rich life. But so they all listened to that show, and I've sent them the MP3 file so they have it in case – someday I'm not going to be around. Maybe the shows can't be. Well, that's the thing about what we do now. All these will be found.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, now I'm a little hesitant to come on your show. I will say. I'm just really glad that, when someone came on your show and they start talking about that, you're like, hey, this is a good time for the sponsor of our episode today. And then you just paused it. I'm glad you didn't do that.
No, I don't do that. No. I don't stop people. If they want to go somewhere, I let them go. I have stopped some people that were doing very foolish things, like speaking ill of their last boss. And had one guest. He was a younger guy, and he was really angry. And I stopped, and I said, I would not do this. And here's why. In my wisdom, father to son kind of thing.
Yep.
And he goes, well, okay, but, he really – I know, but we all have people that disrespect us. Let's not talk about that. Let's talk about what you liked about it. Well, guess what? That guy lost his job 3 months later and got rehired by his old boss.
Oh.
If he had said, if I'd let him say what he was going to say, I know his boss would not have hired him.
No.
So he called me and he said, you saved me. I had a family to feed and and they took me back.
Yeah. And
Thank
he probably said, I still don't like the guy.
Well, you don't have to like him.
Yeah.
I mean, who says we have to like anybody?
That's very true. That's right. Well, yes and no. I don't know. I think it depends on what you're doing too.
Sure.
Obviously I love my brother to death, but if we absolutely hated each other, this probably wouldn't be going
Well,
all
of
that
course,
great.
of
You know what
course.
I mean?
Yeah, but you know what I mean? There's things about coworkers and bosses that we tolerate
Yeah.
and we put up with. But again, that goes back to my philosophy when I started this. I wanted a job with no employees.
Yeah.
I worked with wonderful people in the past, but there was always those few, that one kid in the classroom
Yeah.
that made the whole day miserable.
Yes.
And you had to put up with that.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah,
I get that.
a lot of lessons learned.
If you could go back to when you started Cars Yeah, because again, it's been
9.5 years.
I was going to say, so when is
10 years technically. May 28th of next year will be the 10-year mark that the show went live, but I started working on it 3 months before.
Okay.
So, yeah, it was February and then May. Yeah, so February is when I went, I'm going to do this.
Yeah.
And started building the website and designing the logo and figuring all that stuff out.
Well, so when you went back, like if you could go back, what would you have done differently to get where you are today, perhaps in a quicker fashion?
Advertising more aggressive about seeking advertisers. Just learn to be a good salesperson. Call people, get on the phone, email people. I mean, I just don't like doing that. It's funny because people did that to me during my entire career, and I worked for 11 years before my previous career in advertising, but we were an advertising agency. So we created things for people to use in marketing. But it's just, maybe humble's the wrong word. It's just not comfortable until you get the concept of you're not selling yourself or trying to take money from somebody. You're trying to enhance their business.
Right.
So when you think of it that way, it changes your mindset. And I've had plenty of guests on my show that say, no doesn't mean no. It just means not right now.
Yep.
Or maybe there's another avenue. If
Yep.
I'd known that in high school, I'd had a lot more dates, right? So
That's okay, though.
yeah.
It
Probably,
all happened for a reason.
all
That's why you have Jill.
That's true. That's
Okay.
true. So that's one thing I would do differently.
Yeah.
I wouldn't do more shows. I think 5 was enough. That
Yeah.
was enough. There's other podcasters who do 7. That's a lot. But, some of them are super successful right now that do 7, and it worked out really well for them. So I do that. I think there's little incremental things I would probably have done differently, but we could spend all day talking about all those little things. You go, oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do this. I should have said that, and so forth. You learn when you have to listen to yourself every day, and I hope I become a better speaker. And I try to make my guest shows sound as good as possible, taking out the ums and ers and the burps. And,
It's all right.
I had a guest once that I swore was farting on the show.
Nice.
I kept hearing this, and I finally said, I got to ask you something. What'd you have for lunch? And he goes, what? And I go, I keep hearing this farting sound. And he goes, oh, my dog's laying at my feet. I've just learned to ignore it.
Yeah.
I said, well, it's coming in pretty loud here.
Yeah.
He just laughed. He goes, leave it in.
Yeah.
It'll be funny.
Leave it in. You probably found out he doesn't have a dog.
I didn't find that out, but I thought it was interesting that he was okay with leaving it in. So, I got a few comments from that one. So.
Well, and then you've just got to ad-lib it a little. I remember when we had the fullback for the Miami Dolphins, Alec Ingold, on, probably 5 or 6 minutes in. He didn't come into the studio because, again, we're opening it up today. And so I was doing it at home, and 6 or 7 minutes in, we hear this, beep, 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 like this squeaky, and it's his dog. And he's like, good Lord, right? Yeah. And so then he comes back, and Jeff Davis, who was our recorder, he's like, do you think we should just like restart it? I go, no, we'll just figure it out. And so then afterwards, we did kind of almost like a intermittent Jeopardy style segment of, okay, well, we had to pause this because Alec had some dog issues. And I sent it to Alec. He's like, dude, that was great improv. You kind of have to do that in podcasting.
You do. My first guest was in an airport. So every few minutes, flight number 75, please board at gate. And you're like, you're calling me from an airport?
Yeah.
He goes, yeah, sorry. So sometimes you have to deal with that kind of stuff. I've just learned, one thing I have learned, and Ty will know this, if things don't sound good at the beginning, stop and fix them.
Yes.
Because it doesn't get better, and you can't fix it in post.
Yeah.
You'll go crazy.
Yeah.
So I've had guests where I've said, you know what, our connection's not good enough, or your phone is poor. You need to get the headset I suggested, or we need to do this in a different time. Their Wi-Fi doesn't work. It cuts out.
Oh, yeah.
So you got to, it's like prepping a car for paint.
Yeah.
If you don't do the prep work right, I don't care how good you can spray, not going to look good.
Well, and we were fortunate to interview one of my favorite investors of all time, Guy Spear, who I introduced you to, and I think he's going to be coming on your show next year.
Well, I hope so. Guy.
Yeah. Guy, come on, man. But halfway through the interview, and it came out before this recording airs, the camera started blurring a little. And most of our listeners are on Spotify, although now people are starting to watch because, again, we've got something.
Well, they better now that I'm here.
Yeah, that's right. We've got something to show.
Well, you got a superstar.
Yeah, and I remember Guy was saying like, hey, could we pause this? And I'm like, no, just go, because as long as the content is great and the sound quality is great, that's always been my take. You know what I mean? Because most people, they don't really even want to look at you. They don't want to hear what's coming out of your mouth.
Well, you're right. One thing that I remember my son saying to me and other younger people that listen to lots of podcasts when I started, don't worry so much about the audio quality. You're overthinking it.
Yeah.
But I feel I have an obligation to my guests to make them sound like $1,000,000. And most of my guests are not professional speakers. So they don't speak that well or that clearly. The ums and uhs, the throat clearing, all that stuff. So I take the time to clean all those up because I feel it's an obligation I have to them for them giving me the most precious thing we have, which is our time. And as you get older, you realize, I'll share a time analogy with you. I had a guest who was not, my first oldest guest was 92. I've since had a 98-year-old on my show.
Holy cow.
Ed Iskandarian, he's now 102. But Bill Neal, and he said he was a Texas guy, and my roots are in Texas. My dad was from there. He goes, Mark, I'm going to tell you about getting old. It's like a roll of toilet paper. As you get to the end, it spins faster, and you get more nervous, and you wish you had more. See, it makes everybody. That's a great story. He was just this good old boy, and I always appreciate him. He's passed now, but awesome guy.
Yeah.
Somebody I met at a car show. He's a painter and artist who knew Carol Shelby, and So
Although I'll tell you what, having Crohn's disease, you tell people that with Crohn's disease, that's PTSD all over again.
I'm not bringing that up.
Now, I wanted to ask you, and you've talked about it a little bit, what are some of the best pieces of advice you would give to our capitalizers wanting to get into the world of podcasting as a career?
Well, find people that you can talk with, like I did. Dare I say this? If you want to talk to me about podcasting, call me. You can reach me at mark@carsyeah.com. I like to share with people what I've learned because I've learned that when we're helping others is when we're the happiest we can be. That's a little precursor to what the most important thing I've learned being a podcaster is the secret sauce to life, and that is finding a way to help people. If you can do that through your podcast, that's how you can become successful. So, it's you just have to stay with it, and you have to devise a plan. It's like any business. You have to find a way if you need to transition or turn. It's like digging a hole. Sometimes you got to stop and get out and dig another hole. But most people stop digging before they hit the well, before they hit the water.
Sure.
Because they think you're just, we live in this world of TikToks and all this stuff where, that guy's famous. Well, half those people are fake. They're not even, you can make $20 million a week doing this. Look at my Ferrari. And someone else is driving it away.
Yeah.
Which is the guy that's,
And it's a Kia.
With a Ferrari sticker. You got to, caveat emptor. It's like anything. Got to work hard. But I think the key is you've got to figure out what it is you are passionate about, what you become passionate about, what you can learn a lot about, and then share it with the world. Yeah. And people who it's like your show, you want to learn about finance. Like I joked, I wish I'd had your book when I was 20. I'd be so much further along.
Yeah.
But back then, we had tablets. You had to chisel. So there wasn't that much information. Now there's overload information. You got to figure out what's real and what's not real, especially in the finance world. And I see things all the time that I just kind of laugh, and they're regurgitations of people that were motivational speakers back when I was young. One of my first clients I ever landed in advertising was a guy named Tony Robbins. Probably heard of him, right?
Yeah.
I was walking out of the water on an early morning Dawn Patrol surf session to go shower and go to work, and this giant man is running down the beach with this head that's way too big for his body. And I'm like, this is...
Which is saying a lot because he's a giant.
He is a big guy, yeah. And all of a sudden I went, Tony! I had just listened to his first cassette tapes that he had ever... to try to promote himself. Well, long story short, I landed him as a client. We started doing some advertising and design work for him, and we wanted to put our touch on it, make it different. And he goes, no, I don't want to change anything. Just do it this way. Well, this is the way everybody does it. And I'll never forget this. He said, Mark, that's my whole business, is taking the best of what everybody does and putting it in my own voice and then sharing it with the world. To this day, he says, I read my first 100 books. His finance book is just stories of people that are wealthy in finance. That's what he's done. That's what he's good at. He does it in a very powerful way.
Yeah.
Whether you like the guy or not, you can't say he's not popular and not successful and not financially successful. And he's figured out a way to help people. He has his Feed the World program where I think he's trying to feed 1 billion families now or something like that. So He figured that out, but that was a good learning lesson from him. Don't reinvent the wheel. Look at what other people are doing that are super successful and emulate that, but in your own voice. And that's the other thing. Don't try to be what you're not. I heard that from many podcasters, Mark. You just got to be you. You may feel like you're the dork dad. My kids always call me. Don't try to be Joe Rogan. Don't try to be Mario Andretti on the just be you. So you have to remember to just, and not everybody's going to like you, but that's okay.
Yeah.
Because you don't want people listening to you that don't like you.
Yeah.
You know?
Well, I remember because I call my mom every morning before I come to work, and she was telling me, she goes, Chris, I read this crazy statistic. I go, Mom, what's the deal? She goes, 10% of people will never like you. And she found that.
I'm surprised it's only 10.
Not
because they won't like you.
No,
Sorry.
No. Yeah, it's definitely higher. But I thought about that, and just the math guy in me, I was like, well, that's great, because the next time you talk to someone, in theory, if they just hate your guts, the odds of the next 9 liking or loving you, I mean, it goes through the roof. And then, God forbid, you have 2 people in a row. Right? You're just basically compounding the next person that is just going to love everything that you do.
Right.
So I get that. And you're not going to please everyone. It's easy for us to say now that we've established our podcasts, but when you're just starting out, and because the internet can be brutal, you put everything into your first episode.
Right.
And you put it out there. You're like, oh my gosh, I've got a couple comments. And you read them. You're like, oh, like this guy hates me. I mean, it's not like, you get death threats or any of that, but like there's stuff out there like that.
Well, there's people, there's going to always be haters. You just have to stay true and listen to people you value their opinions, and hopefully they'll speak honestly to you about how to be better at your skill, your craft, message.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
Well, and before we close out the show, I have one final question I have to ask you. So, and it's obviously a more financially focused question, since this is Capitalize Your Finances.
Yes.
So what are the best pieces of advice you know now that you wish you knew before you started Cars Yeah?
Oh, man, I thought you were going to go way back further than that.
No.
Financial, well, again, if you're going to start something like this and you're going to do what I did, make sure you have a big runway ahead of you, meaning you've been smart, which I did. You've saved money. Mm-hmm. You've set it aside. Mm-hmm. I've talked to people that have tried doing a new thing without any money and savings at all. Very challenging to do. You're probably going to fail pretty quick because you're worried about the money. My goal was, I don't care if I don't make any money for 12 months. I'm just going to do this thing and see where it goes. I got very fortunate with NOCO, and then that led to other people hearing their ads, and then it started to grow. And I went, okay, this kind of works. But you need to be financially sound and practice the things that you preach, especially to young people, about preparing yourself, saving more money, don't live beyond your means, all the basic stuff that makes sense, but many people in this world don't do. I still to this day laugh at when you see an advertisement for mattresses. 36 months to pay off your... If you can't afford to buy a mattress, save up and buy a mattress.
Yes.
Don't pay it off for 36 months, because you know what? They're going to trick you, because in 36 months when you've made no payments, and then all of a sudden they start putting that 29% interest thing on you, and you go, by then your mattress is worn out and you need another one. So all this stuff you preach, you need to just be financially sound. So, have some... If you can't do that, learn from somebody. Listen to your show and figure out to do that, because that will help you not have to worry about the money at the beginning. If you're going to do it for a living, yeah, you definitely got to figure out, is there a way to make money doing this? And there definitely is. Some people are making huge amounts of money doing this. But have some wherewithal there. Otherwise, and don't go into debt.
Yeah.
For your business. That's the other thing is, I can just max out all my credit cards. Well, when's your payoff going to be? Have you figured that out? And then, don't do silly stuff like that.
Don't do silly stuff.
Yes. Right. Yeah. It's for someone like me who's been around and seen all those mistakes, and I've made some of those mistakes. That credit card they gave me my first day in college, when you walk down and all those little booths are set up and you can have a credit card, $400. And I went out and bought a set of wheels for my car. And then the first payment came, it's only $20. And then the second one, only $20. How come the principal is higher than when I started?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, this was stupid, you know? Cut the card. Okay, learn that lesson now, not later.
Yeah.
Like so many people have. Yeah, so.
Well, Mark, this has been an absolute pleasure and a half, and we're going to have you on again. But before we close it out, where can capitalizers go to support and follow you?
Oh, thank you. First and foremost, congratulations on what we're doing here. And
thank you.
Very grateful for being your first, person in this wonderful setup. I should come and do my podcast here. That'd be cool.
Good.
See, there's a way to capitalize this. You can rent this studio out.
Absolutely. You've been talking about that.
Well, yeah,
yes.
You should. This is a really nice place. So I appreciate that very much and what you and Ty have been for our family and friends. But just the opportunity. You can find Cars Yeah on any mobile podcast app. Easy to find. Cars Yeah, YEAH. You can find my website where all my past guests are listed. There's even a category in there with the categories of guests. So if you want to watch racers, photographers, there's a place in there called Guest Recommended Books. Got an affiliate with Amazon. So every time somebody buys a book that my guest recommended, Amazon sends me 2 pennies now, I think, maybe.
Okay.
Maybe 3. But they send me some coffee money every month.
It adds up.
It adds up over time, yeah. My wife always, hey, guess what? You got $220 from Amazon this month. Yeah. All right, there we go. There's groceries. You can find me on all the social media apps. I'm all over the place. Yeah, easy to find. And if you're someone listening or watching this show that you're in the automotive sector, you have a business in that sector, you do something there, reach out to me. Love to talk to you about being a guest on the show. Always looking for inspiring automotive enthusiasts.
Oh, I love that. And to you capitalizers, thank you for listening in to a lovely episode of Capitalize Your Finances in the Capitalize Your Finances studio. Huge shout out again to my brother behind the scenes. If it was not for him, none of this would be rocking and rolling. So Tyler, thank you. Mark, thank you. For those of you that are new to the show, welcome. And if you veterans are listening and you already know the drill, if you have any questions about today's episode, you know what to do. Either hit me up, chris@capitalizeyourfinances.com, or give us a call at 253-214-3050. That's 253-214-3050. And if you are listening in, you say, man, this place is pretty rocking and rolling. I would love to be a guest on Capitalize Your Finances in the studio in Tacoma, Washington. Head on over to capitalizepodcast.com. Shoot us a DM. I look at it every single day. As always, I'm your host, Christopher A. Paniotu, the Cap and Capitalize. And until next time, keep capitalizing.
Christopher Paniotu is a registered representative with and securities and advisory services offered through LPL Financial, a registered investment advisor and member FINRA SIPC. The investment professionals are affiliated with LPL Financial and are conducting business using the name Capitalize Your Finances, a separate entity from LPL Financial. Mark Greene and any other individual or company mentioned in this podcast are not affiliated with Capitalize Your Finances or LPL Financial.